Oh shit. The monologues are starting, right? Hello geeks and girls, I think it's high time we did a review for this video, which I reread for quite some time now. I believe I started reading it a couple of months ago and only finished in the beginning of this month. So yeah, this book took me a while to read. It's Memories of Ice by Erikson, and that's a fun thing because on my first read it took me only 3 or 4 days. So it was quite different, and you know what, it's not a small book, it's almost 1200 words, 1200 pages long. So yeah, it's chunky, and the fact that my copy was falling apart while reading it did not help a lot, because I was not able to take it outside with me, you know, on the road, read it while I'm walking, or you know, go out in a park and read it away from computers and mobile phones and all those stuff like I like to do for reading, or take it on a bus or something, even though I'm not using many buses or this kind of stuff because of you know, the situation. But nevertheless, being unable to carry this book with me, having it at home and having to worry about pages falling apart was a bit of a bummer. There is also something more I want to say that really bothered me about this book, but I'll tell you about it in a while, because to be honest, in this book, the third in the series, it feels like it covers less stuff than the first book, which was almost half the size. Less plot lines, less events, yet bigger. And the reason it feels that it's much less is because a lot of things are set up in the first 2 books. Malazan, Book of the Fallen, is a 10-book series that can be read as one huge novel. And in this big scheme of things, the first 2 books are setting the ground and the world for us, and then we get to book 3, and here is where the inciting incident starts. And in the very first pages of this book, we meet our villain of the series, which was mentioned in the previous books, but here we first see that villain, and now we have an idea that yes, all those characters we have seen in book 1 are going out to deal with said situation that is emerging, and that really drives the book forward. The fact that we already know half the characters in this book is also very helpful, because we don't have to search for what's happening with the Malazans. No, it's just a continuation of many of the plot arcs that were set up or even resolved and then progressed in the next book. So we have a lot of familiar characters we meet again, and it feels very good. And yeah, you start to understand how this book works, how some things mentioned in previous books are carrying over here or happening in tandem, because this book takes place at the same time as book 2, Deadhouse Gates. So it's kind of interesting to see how they interact, even though they're not they're happening in different continents, and people cannot travel between continents because stuff are happening with the Warrens in both books. So we have some interactions of things happening here and there. And we have a lot of stuff. We have 2 very epic battles. We have the Siege of Kapustan, and then the other battle that are just epic. And Erikson really does know how to write big epic battles. We have a lot of stuff, a lot of world building, a lot of information about the world. And since some things are starting to forming a bigger picture, it's very, very interesting. There is also a lot of infighting in different factions of this book, which is very typical to the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, because everybody has their own agenda, and oftentimes most characters know more than the reader, which is something that makes this series stand out and make it a bit confusing, but also very interesting because it can surprise you. You can see stuff happening you did not expect, or some things are foreshadowed and pay off. They're set up early on, then paid off later. I won't spoil things. This is a non-spoiler review, but as I said, this book is significantly chunkier than the previous ones. And this is because one of the elements that I dislike about the series, that my one pet peeve of the series, the inner monologues, are starting to get introduced. And at this point, they're not egregious. They're not disrupting the flow. They actually add to it. We have characters coming up with their own thoughts, or while talking they think of their own stuff. They have some sentences or paragraphs about what they're thinking about morality, about philosophy, which feels great. However, I was having flashbacks to later books in the series where this gets really annoying, at least for me. I remember it being very annoying back then, and here it was like, oh shit, the monologues are starting, right? So yeah, that was my one pet peeve of this book. It really flows very well, especially when you have established characters. I mean, it stumbles in places when you have to meet new characters and get acquainted to it, and new settings and new plot lines, but whatever, that's something I'll have to get used to as I'm going along with the Malazan books. I mean, yeah, it happens. It's some established things that carry over, more new characters. So yeah, and the new characters, they're interesting. I mean, the Grey Swords were just amazing. The band of mercenaries were so-and-so. I was not a fan of them, but as everything is coming together, it feels very good. And I'll just make a segue here because I was watching a video on, I think it was the Critical Dragon, Philip Sayce, talking about Malazan not being grimdark, which was an interesting conversation. And as I was watching this video a bit after I finished this book, or I was finishing this book, I'm not sure really. I have not scripted this video, so as you can see, I'm just wasn't able to go and look up for it. But I get why, even though Malazan Book of the Fallen can be considered grimdark, because yes, there are undead velociraptors with sword arms in this book, and also an army of cannibals that are created by a system that creates them, and there are those grim undead punishers of sort in the Tlanimas. There's a lot of grim stuff happening, a lot of horror stuff happening. People are dying, and many of them do not deserve that. It's very dark, and it's not grim. Malazan is the daddy of grimdark in a way. It's no, it's the cool uncle of grimdark. The daddy of grimdark is probably the Black Company. Malazan is like the cool uncle. It was also born out of the Black Company, but at the same time, it's not about grimness. It's about hope and redemption, and these are two themes that play throughout this book and in the next books. I mean, the main characters here are heroic, even though they have the limitations, and even gods have limitations, even ascendants and very powerful figures. They are all acting heroic. They make the decisions that does not make them villains. It makes them heroes, or in some cases tragic anti-heroes. Yes, I'm talking about Rake. And they have to make some very hard choices to establish their morality, which feels great this time around, because I have been at the end, and this book foreshadows a lot of things to come, but I'll talk about it in my spoiler videos whenever they come out, because there was a scene, it was like, oh my, it was there all over, and I hadn't noticed. So yeah, that's an amazing work, and yeah, I mean, the first time around, this book made me a Malazan super fan, and then I read House of Chains, and I dropped the series for 5 or years or so. Yeah, it does not help me saying that, but the way it is set up, the way it is done, I really enjoyed it, and it was epic, it was dark, grim, but was also very full of humor and heart that balanced apart. It's like 50% grimdark, 50% Discworld, which sounds... it's grimdark Discworld, right? Only serious. It's bigger than most fantasy novels are. And I don't mean about the page count, I mean about the content and the messages and the characters and the philosophy of it. And I think this is a prime example of how good the series can be, despite having some odd parts here and there. It's happening. I mean, I remember Dead House Gates being a bit dull towards the middle, but the second time around was like, no, it's not. It's actually setting up quite a lot of things. You were just rushing through the first time, you didn't notice. Here, the first time I couldn't stop reading. This time around I was like, yeah, it's taking its time. But I think it needs its time. I mean, I could do without the two necromancers. Alright, I could do without those two fellows. They were bad comic relief. I know there are some novellas about them, and maybe I should give them a read sometime, because I believe their novellas can be a lot of fun, but I didn't feel like these two guys worked within this book. But I really loved Quick Ben coming out and being a total badass, and yeah, it was a good part of the book, and the bridge burners being heroic, and despite being humans, they were kick-ass characters, and it felt very good to see them what bridge burners could be, because these guys are badasses. They're a force to be reckoned with. And then we have these cool ideas of the Katsan Temale, whatever the hell it's called. I hate fantasy names. You have these iconic characters that have ages of experience, like Calor or Caladon Brood or Lady Envy or Anamanda Rake, which are a great juxtaposition to your average characters like Duzek or Whiskey Jug or Quick Ben or Paran, which yeah, they can be also badasses in their own way. We have more characters, and Tool is a badass. Tool is like, yeah, I mean, I say that romances are not great in in Malazan Book of the Fallen, and yeah, I can see that this book doesn't fix the romance angle, even though the relationship between two characters, it felt very good in its conflict and their attraction and how it progresses, but the bromances are just amazing. I mean, Tool and Talk, they're a bromance for the ages, and I really loved the aspect of friendship, of camaraderie, of hope, and of sacrifice. This is prime military fantasy. It's about friendship and camaraderie, and that brings the hope. It's not grimdark, it's hope dark. Malazan is hope dark. So yeah, I think I have rambled enough for this book. I'm not sure when I'm able to do the chapter by chapter reviews, because filming is not easy. Probably it will be podcast style with me talking to the mic without a camera, so I'll be able to do that because it's uncomfortable. The heat is just not easy to do videos in the summer, because lighting and you know, having to close windows, turn off air conditions and all kind of stuff to have a better sound. So yeah, I'll probably do some podcast style and release them in the next weeks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.